the day we didn't have a nuclear war.
The retreat to Moscow. Russian ships steam out from Cuban ports with their decks loaded with missiles the Soviets are withdrawing under pressure from the New World. It's one of the last chapters in the offensive threat from Cuba that led the United States to throw a quarantine around that island and force the Russians to dismantle their medium-range rocket installations. U.S. planes and picket ships have counted 42 rockets on Russian-bound ships. But still unresolved is the question of the jet bombers in Cuba. Castro claims they belong to him and that he will not give them up. The U.S. insists the Russians must remove them before the quarantine will be lifted.
Integration of American schools takes a major step on June 11, 1963.
The University of Alabama campus at Tuscaloosa is under a tight security guard of state police as Governor George Wallace appeals for calm and prepares to confront a deputy U.S. attorney. The federal officers are armed with a proclamation from President Kennedy urging the governor to end his efforts to prevent 2 Negro students from registering at the university. The governor is adamant. He made a campaign promise to stand in the doorway himself to prevent the integration of the last all-white state university. After the federal officers leave, there's a lull of several hours while President Kennedy federalizes the Alabama National Guard and...
In 3 days, another major civil rights event will take place. Meanwhile, Alabama yields.
Brigadier General Henry Graham arrives to tell the governor, "It's my sad duty to ask you to step aside on orders of the President of the United States." The governor yields to federal authority, but promises to continue what he terms a constitutional fight. There was no untoward incident at any time during this confrontation of state and federal authority. Five minutes after the governor leaves, James Hood is the first of his race to become a University of Alabama student.
On June 14, 1963, the civil rights movement picks up momentum in our nation's capital.
Just 100 years after Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation that freed the slaves, 200,000 people converge on the nation's capital to rally for civil rights. They come by train, they come by bus and by air. They come from the north, the south, the east and west. They come united in one cause, to urge Congress to pass a civil rights bill to end forever the blight of racial inequity. This great throng with a cause gathers on the mall that stretches from the Washington Monument toward the Capitol. The theme, the keynote, the thought uppermost in minds of all here today is best set forth by Dr. King. He sums up a day the Capitol will long remember.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up without the children of all these two self-evident. They're all men. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners, will they be able to sit down together at the table. I have a dream.
Washington, D.C., 1963. Democracy speaks in a mighty voice.
November 22, 1963, President Kennedy is assassinated.
A dark page in the annals of America has been written to the crack of an assassin's bullet. A nation mourns, the world grieves. The man who became 35th president less than 3 years ago is dead. He led his country boldly through the treacherous shoals of Cold War crises. His firm commitments to support the cause of democracy throughout the world won him a claim almost unprecedented in the history of the presidency. He faced up to communist threats with such firm shows of force that Khrushchev backed down in Cuba, softened the hard red line on Berlin. He brought to the White House the vigor of youth and a family that captivated the hearts of all. No possible shadow loomed over this last group picture of his family, John and Jacqueline, John and Caroline. Death has closed the cover in album portraits like this. His rendezvous with grim destiny begins a little after noontime as his plane lands in Dallas. Earlier, he had received a tumultuous reception in Fort Worth, and now more thousands are waiting to greet him in downtown Dallas. But death is less than 1 short hour away. At 1:25, the motorcade moves into the downtown area. Death is 6 minutes away. In a warehouse, a sniper with a rifle poised waits. The cheers of the crowd almost muffle the 3 shots. The assassin's aim is deadly. The area is aswarm with police, rangers, and Secret Service men. The murderer slips the net, but a few blocks away, a man is captured after he is reported to have killed a policeman. That man is a 24-year-old pro-Castro Texan who once sought Soviet citizenship. He is charged with murder. Meanwhile, the president had been rushed to a nearby hospital where life lingered as a waiting world prayed. A half hour later, he was dead, his life crushed like his wife's abandoned bouquet. A shocked nation weeps. Across the country, around the world, disbelief was the first reaction. Then a great outpouring of grief, shock, and revulsion. A proud banner is lowered. The empty White House is a symbol of this infamous mockery of American ideals of peace and freedom. Peoples of all faiths unite in prayer for the first Catholic to become president. The United Nations General Assembly joins in a minute of silent tribute to the man who fought so hard and valiantly for the ideals of this international body. The Iron Curtain was dissolved in the sincerity of their sorrow.
To the newsreels, November 22nd, 1963 is a day of national shock and mourning. But the day will be more significant than that in the long run. With Johnson now president, there will be a shift in national priorities. The Great Society will replace the New Frontier. Johnson's focus will be on civil rights and other social issues, although on this day, he and the rest of the nation must deal with the assassination of a president.
Mr. Johnson accompanies the martyred president's body back to the Capitol, a Capitol still paralyzed by shock. Sad tasks are ahead. It is arranged that the president's body will first lie in repose at the White House. Then it will be moved to the rotunda of the Capitol for public homage. The president's body is met by a cordon of servicemen. They represent all the armed forces in honoring their commander-in-chief. The widow, on the arm of her brother-in-law, remains a towering figure of fortitude through her long ordeal. Steadfast in death as in life, she accompanies her beloved on his lonely ride. Then President Johnson and the First Lady leave the plane. Now the Texan who has devoted his life to an energetic public career faces the burdens of office in days of foreign and domestic crises to keep burning the torch that has inspired a free world. With humility, the President of the United States harks to the future.
This is a sad time for all people. We have suffered a loss that cannot be weighed. For me, it is family bare. I will do my best. That is all I can do. I ask for your help and God's.
In some men, the presidency has bred greatness. They have become giants forged in the crucible of courage. Now begins a new chapter in the history of a nation grown great under the inspired leadership of great men. President Johnson faces his monumental tasks with a sense of integrity that is unquestioned, with knowledge that breeds respect, and with hope that God will guide his hand. Far into his first night as president, he faces his awesome future unflinchingly. The light of reason won't be dimmed by a rifle shot. May God, in his wisdom, help President Johnson keep it shining brightly.
Civil rights guaranteed for all.
Congress passes the most sweeping civil rights bill ever to be written into the law, and thus reaffirms the conception of equality for all men that began with Lincoln and the Civil War 100 years ago. The Negro won his freedom then. He wins his dignity now. 5 hours after the House passes the measure, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is signed at the White House by President Johnson. Before an audience of legislators and civil rights leaders who had labored long and hard for passage of the bill, President Johnson calls for all Americans to back what he calls a turning point in history.
This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate.
On this day, less than a year since Kennedy's assassination, it is clear that Johnson is following his own sense of what the national purpose should be. Johnson's focus now is racial peace and justice at home. On a day less than a month from now, an action he will take will have far-reaching consequences in Vietnam. But today, his attention is on a significant domestic issue, civil rights.
Integration leader Martin Luther King receives his pen, a gift he said he would cherish. The Department of Justice will enforce the law if necessary, and G-Man Chief J. Edgar Hoover is present. Another group of pens is reserved for the Kennedys, and the Attorney General is entrusted with a half dozen. Now, in this summer of 1964, the Civil Rights Bill is the law of the land. In the words of the President, it restricts no one's freedom so long as he respects the rights of others. The voice of the people was heard in the land. 68 million citizens of the United States go to the polls to exercise their cherished franchise, and an overwhelming mandate is handed to Lyndon Baines Johnson, who becomes 36th President of the United States.
Americans are not aware that their overwhelming vote for Johnson on this day, November 3rd, 1964, will allow the Vietnam conflict to escalate and eventually bitterly divide the nation.
It is an historical, sweeping victory, approached only by that of Franklin Roosevelt in 1936. It is an election that crosses party lines, sees 5 states in the solid South defect to the GOP, and has political scientists wondering.
These have been those 21 historic days whose consequences Americans could never fully anticipate. Events the newsreels faithfully recorded for us to look back on later.
In victory, he seems subdued by the terrible burdens he must assume during the coming years. The United States is a nation that can be divided in the heat of an election and united again quickly when differences are resolved. A mandate has been given. Now may the people of the United States move forward behind their president, Lyndon Baines Johnson.
21 days that changed America.